My name is Dylan Drang, and what I'm about to tell you is what the French Revolution was fought for. The National Assembly.
That first bit must have got you there, huh? So, Mr. Taylor, you've decided to join us. Welcome to the first and final episode of So, What's Changed? Where, on the topic of the French Revolution, we will be talking about equality, one of the three principles of the French Revolution. That includes liberty, equality, and fraternity. So, let's see what's changed. So, equality. Literally, probably the entire point of the French Revolution. It honestly probably wouldn't have started if the French were treated so badly and Louis wasn't such a crappy king and there wasn't any debt from his gambling addict wife and her lavish hairstyles. So, teenagers, am I right? So you see equality throughout the French Revolution. It takes many faces, with women's rights and the equality in death with the guillotine, or the guillotine. The press can decide how to pronounce that. And then you also have just the third estate in general, with the, hey, we're not being treated fairly, we're 97% of the population, and we have the same amount of representatives as the other 3% of the population. So they rose up, they said, hey, we're going to show you who's boss, because the third estate is everything. So I think one of the coolest things that came from the National Assembly is that they granted equality to women and slaves, which, to be frank, it didn't last long, but the fact that they were there beforehand, because I feel like their whole kind of, like, just the National Assembly kind of went downhill after it changed names, and then Robespierre and all these other people came into the mix. Like, you can kind of see, like, the French Revolution starting off in a really good place and then kind of going downhill, and you're like, oh, well, it's fine, I guess. But they had slaves and the women, and they were granted rights, and so I think that equality is probably one of the coolest things, though it was lost later on in the French Revolution. It was definitely, like, something up there, because you don't really, like, see that. Like, there's still slaves in America, from what I remember, and women don't really have rights, and so that was something that was more ahead of the time from my perspective. I think the guillotine was definitely an interesting, like, way to look at equality, because now there's an equality in death, and so death beforehand, definitely entertainment, and death now, like in French Revolution times, and the guillotine, still entertainment, but, you know, what can you do? Because beforehand, to quote one of my favorite shows, Disenchantment, remember how people used to just work, starve, or eat? Well, now there's a fourth thing, entertainment. So death was definitely entertainment. But the equality part of it is that no matter who you are, your head ended up in that basket. It started out with the king, and then the queen, and then the whole reign of terror, where you had nobles and clergymen and enemies of the people, and just a whole line, you just, one by one, walking up and getting their heads chopped off, because who cared? Well, Robespierre did. The whole thing. And I guess the most equal thing about it is that he had this whole thing lined up where all these people are gonna die, and then his head was the one that ended up as one of the, last ones of the Reign of Terror. So what goes around comes around.